Rafael Nadal almost never speaks publicly the moment a former student wins a title. Think about that for a second. Over a decade of players passing through his academy, hundreds of them probably, and in all that time, he has done this exactly twice. Twice. And one of those two times happened just a few hours ago in Washington. When Alex Eala lifted that trophy at the DC Open, something shifted online almost instantly. Fans expected the usual round of polite applause from the tennis world, a few nice words, maybe a retweet. Instead, within hours, one of the greatest athletes to ever walk onto a tennis court broke his silence in a way that made people stop scrolling and actually pay attention. Here is what makes this so strange. Nadal congratulates players all the time. He is generous with praise. He shows up at charity events. He name-drops rising stars in interviews. He plays the diplomat with the media better than almost anyone in the sport. But this was different. This felt personal. This felt specific. And if you slow down and actually read what he wrote, word for word, you will notice something that nearly every headline completely missed. There is a pattern buried inside two messages, sent more than a year apart, both aimed at the same 21-year-old from the Philippines. Once you see that pattern, you cannot unsee it. It changes the whole shape of the story. But honestly, the message itself is not even the most interesting part of this. The most interesting part is something Eala said months ago, almost as a throwaway line in a podcast interview, something she probably did not think twice about at the time. And when you place that line next to what just happened in Washington, it completely changes how you should think about this relationship. So, is this just a mentor being proud of his student? Or is there something heavier sitting underneath it? Something about pressure? Something about a fear that never actually goes away? No matter how many trophies pile up on the shelf, stick around, because by the time this video ends, you are going to look at every future Nadal post about Alex Eala in a completely different light. But to really understand why Rafael Nadal broke a habit he has kept for over a decade, you first need to understand exactly what Alex Eala had to survive to make him do it. Let me walk you through what actually happened on that court, because the scale of it is easy to miss if you were not watching closely, if you only saw the headline and moved on. Alex Eala is 21 years old. She is from the Philippines. And on Monday, in front of a crowd that would not stop screaming her name, she did something no woman from her country has ever done in the entire history of the sport. She won a WTA Tour-level singles title. Not just any title either. A WTA 500. One tier below the very biggest tournaments in tennis. And she did not win it the easy way, not even close. Standing across the net was Jessica Pegula, the top seed, ranked number 3 on the entire planet. The final kicked off on Sunday, and then the sky opened up. Rain hammered the court, play got suspended overnight, and Eala had to go to sleep knowing she was down in the match. Imagine that. Lying awake, replaying every point, knowing you have to wake up the next morning and somehow finish a fight you are currently losing. When play resumed, Pegula came out swinging, sharp and confident, exactly like a world number 3 should. But then something shifted. Slowly at first, then all at once. Eala clawed back the second set. 4-6, 6-4, and she did not just win the third set after that. She erased Pegula completely. 6-0. A bagel against the best player left in the draw. 4-6, 6-4, 6-0. Sit with those numbers for a second. That is not a lucky bounce or a bad day for the favorite. That is a 21-year-old getting punched in the mouth in the first set and then calmly deciding that the rest of the match belongs to her. And Pegula was only the final boss. She was not the only big-name Eala had to get through that week. To even reach that final, she had to take down Zheng Qinwen, an Olympic gold medalist. She had to get past Leylah Fernandez, the defending champion of that very tournament, on the exact court where Fernandez was supposed to defend her crown. She had to outlast Alina Svitolina, a veteran with more big match scars than almost anyone left in the field. And in the semifinal, she had to solve Naomi Osaka, a four-time Grand Slam champion who has broken tougher opponents than this on far bigger stages. Four elite, battle-hardened opponents. 1 week, one 21-year-old, from a country that had never once produced a WTA champion. Now here is where the story turns personal. Eala did not build this game by accident, and she did not build it alone. At just 13 years old, she packed up and left home, moving all the way to Mallorca, Spain, to train at a place called the Rafa Nadal Academy. Yes, that Rafa Nadal. She lived there. She trained there. She grew up there, year after year, until she graduated in 2023. Picture that for a second. Really picture it. A 13-year-old pulled away from everything familiar, from her family, her language, her home, and sent halfway across the world to train under the direct watch of one of the greatest athletes to ever hold a racket. Not just his name stamped on a building somewhere, his actual presence, his actual standards, his actual eyes on her, day after day. That is the environment that quietly forged the player who just dismantled four ranked opponents in a single, brutal week. And this is exactly why what happened right after that final matters so much. Because the man who helped shape that mentality, the man who watched her grow from a homesick teenager into a champion standing on the biggest stage of her career, was paying attention the entire time. He watched it unfold from a distance, thousands of miles away. And he did not stay quiet. If you are the kind of person who needs to know how a story like this actually ends, stay with me, because we are about to get into exactly what he said and exactly why it carries so much more weight than it looks like on the surface. Because right after that final point was won, somebody who almost never comments in real time sent a message. And the wording of that message is not something you want to skim past. Here is exactly what Rafael Nadal posted, word for word. He wrote, "Congratulations, Alex Eala. What an incredible week in Washington. A well-deserved trophy for all the hard work. Congratulations to the Philippines and to the entire Rafa Nadal Academy team." Read that again, slowly this time. Notice what he actually did there. He did not just congratulate Alex, he congratulated the entire Academy team, an entire institution, essentially thanking itself through him for one 21-year-old's win on the other side of the world. That detail slides right past you if you are moving fast. Almost every article that covered this story quoted the message and kept scrolling. But sit with what it actually means. When a coach or a mentor or anyone in that position credits an entire team after one athlete's win, it is rarely just politeness. It usually means the win was not a surprise to them at all. It means they were watching, tracking, quietly, expecting this the whole time. And here is where it gets even more interesting. This is not the first time Nadal has done this for Eala. Rewind to March of last year. Eala was ranked far lower back then, practically a nobody outside hardcore tennis circles. She was grinding through the Miami Open as a wildcard. No real expectations attached to her name, and then she pulled off something nobody saw coming. She beat Iga Swiatek, one of the best players alive, on either tour. And right after that win, Nadal posted this: "We are extremely proud of you, Alex. What an incredible tournament. Let us keep dreaming." 2 messages, more than a year apart, both public, both specific, both about the exact same person. So ask yourself something. How many players has Rafael Nadal trained through that academy since it opened its doors? Dozens, at the very least. Probably far more. And out of all of them, how many has he personally, publicly celebrated online, in real time, within hours of their biggest wins? 2. Both times, for the exact same 21-year-old. That is not random. That is not just a generous coach being equally kind to everyone who ever walked through his gates. That is a pattern. And once you notice a pattern like that, the obvious question starts nagging at you. What makes Alex Eala different? Why her, and not the dozens of other names who trained on those same courts? Some people would say it is simple. She is the Academy's best result. She is proof the whole system actually works, and if that were the entire story, honestly, this video could end right here. A great coach recognizing his best student. Nice, sure, but not exactly shocking. Except, that is not the whole story. Not even close. Because there is a real difference between a coach admiring a student's success from a comfortable distance and a coach who still makes that student nervous just by walking into a room. And it turns out, uncomfortably, that the second version is a lot closer to the truth here. There is a comment Alex Eala made, not after a big win, not in some polished, media-trained press conference, but almost by accident, in a casual, unguarded podcast conversation. And once you hear what she actually said about her relationship with Nadal, that celebratory message starts to look a lot less like simple pride and a lot more like something heavier resting quietly underneath it. So here is the real question this whole video has been building toward. Is Rafael Nadal proud of Alex Eala the way any mentor is proud of a star student? Or is there something else going on here? Something about power. Something about fear. The kind of fear that never really leaves you, even after you have already proven yourself on the biggest stages your sport has to offer. Because honestly, that public message was never really the most interesting part of this story. The most interesting part is what Alex Eala said in private, months before any of this happened, when nobody was watching, and when she had absolutely no reason to say anything except exactly what she felt. A few months before that Washington final, Alex Eala sat down for an interview on Andy Roddick's podcast. It was loose, relaxed. The kind of conversation where guests usually let their guard down and say what they actually mean, because there is no trophy on the line and no reporter waiting to twist their words into a headline. And somewhere in that conversation, she was asked about Nadal, about what it is really like being around him, even now, even after everything she has already accomplished. Here is what she said, as close to word for word as it gets. He is there a lot, and he is very down to earth when you talk to him. He asks questions, but he is Rafa, so you are always going to be scared. I am always still scared. I do not know what to say. I always get very tongue-tied. It does not get easier. Just sit with that for a second. This is not a wide-eyed teenager talking about her intimidating coach on day one at the academy. This is a 21-year-old woman who just became the first player from her entire country to win a WTA Tour title. A woman who has already beaten Iga Swiatek. A woman who has already fought her way into the top 20 in the world. And she is telling you, in her own words, completely unprompted, that being around Rafael Nadal still makes her nervous, still makes her freeze up, still leaves her tongue tied. It does not get easier. That is the line that should stop you cold. Because here is what most of us assume about mentorship stories like this one. You start out intimidated by the legend. You train under him for years. You grow, you improve, you get stronger. And eventually, once you have proven yourself, that fear is supposed to fade. You become something closer to his equal, or at least close enough that the nerves finally disappear. That is the version of the story we are all conditioned to expect. The scared kid slowly becomes the confident champion, and the old intimidation quietly turns into mutual respect. But that is not what Eala is describing at all. She is describing something that has not faded one bit. Something that followed her from age 13, when she first arrived at that academy as a homesick kid barely speaking the language, all the way to age 21, standing on the single biggest stage of her career so far. Think about what that actually reveals about the environment that raised her as a player. This was not some soft, encouraging bubble where a legend occasionally wandered by to pat people on the back and pose for a photo. This was a place where his presence alone carried enough weight to make even his most successful graduate second-guess herself years and years later. And once you understand that, Nadal's public message after Washington starts to read completely differently. It stops looking like simple pride from a mentor watching a student succeed from afar. It starts looking like something closer to relief, recognition that all of that pressure, all of that quiet, constant intensity she absorbed just from being near him for years, actually built something real, actually forged a champion who could walk into a rain-delayed final against the world number 3 and not blink. Not once. And there is one more detail that confirms this is not just about one man and one player. It is bigger than that. Alongside Nadal's message, his sister Maribel, who works as the deputy general director of the academy itself, posted her own congratulations directly to Eala. Congrats for your first WTA 500 trophy. Well deserved. That is not a coincidence. That is not two people separately noticing the same headline and reacting on their own. That is an institution speaking with one voice. The academy, through its own leadership, both of them blood related to the man who built its entire reputation, stepping forward publicly for exactly one graduate. So this is not really a story about a legend being kind to a former student. It is a story about an environment so demanding, so quietly intense, that even years after leaving it, the fear it planted has never fully gone away. And that same environment is now standing up, proudly, publicly, claiming credit for the champion it helped build. But knowing the pressure was real is only half the picture here. The real question is whether that pressure actually explains what we watched unfold on the court in Washington. Because if this theory holds up, if years of quiet intimidation really did forge something unshakable inside Alex Eala, then the numbers from that tournament should tell you the exact same story. And they do. Every single one of them. If you still think this was just one lucky week, take a hard look at exactly who was standing across the net from Alex Eala on her way to that trophy. Because that list reads like a murderer's row, not some soft, forgiving bracket. Round after round, she went through players who had already conquered the biggest stages in this sport. First, Zheng Qinwen, an Olympic gold medalist. Then Leylah Fernandez, the defending champion of that exact tournament, the player who was supposed to defend her own title on her own turf. Then Elina Svitolina, a veteran with more big match scar tissue than almost anyone left in that draw. Then Naomi Osaka, a four-time Grand Slam champion, standing in her way in the semi-final. And finally, Jessica Pegula, the world number 3, in a final that stretched across 2 exhausting days because of the rain. 4 ranked, accomplished, thoroughly battle-tested opponents. One single week, one 21-year-old. This is not a story about someone catching fire for a single afternoon. This is a story about someone who kept solving a completely different problem every single day against a different style, a different level of pressure for 5 straight matches in a row. And the person standing closest to her through every single one of those matches was Joan Bosch, her coach, part of the coaching staff at the Rafa Nadal Academy. Right after the win, Bosch spoke to the press, and here is exactly what he said. "I can tell you that I am super happy because this was the goal of the year. Alex is a very good champion, and she deserves this win." Listen closely to how he phrased that. Not, "I am surprised." Not, "I cannot believe this just happened." He said, "This was the goal of the year." That single word, goal, tells you everything you need to know. This was not some fluke they stumbled into. This was a target they had been quietly building toward for months, in near total silence, away from the cameras. The results backed that up completely. Before this tournament, Eala was already climbing steadily. After this win, she reached a career-high ranking of world number 20. 20. In a sport with hundreds of professional players scattered across the globe, she is now sitting inside the top 20, and she earned that spot by beating 4 of the toughest competitors on tour in a single, unforgiving week. But here is the detail that most of the coverage completely missed, and honestly, it might be the most revealing piece of this entire story. During that overnight rain delay, with the final suspended and Pegula ahead on the scoreboard, Eala did not spiral. She did not panic online, She did not let the waiting eat away at her. She picked up a book, Wuthering Heights, and she sat there, calmly reading a few chapters, while the biggest match of her career hung unfinished in the air above her. Really think about that for a second. A 21-year-old, mere hours away from either winning or losing the biggest title of her entire life, sitting quietly with 19th century English literature, like it was just another ordinary Tuesday night. That is not natural composure. Nobody is simply born with that. That is trained composure. That is the kind of stillness you only develop after years, spent inside an environment that demands it of you constantly, an environment where even the greatest champion in the room still makes you nervous, and somehow you learn to function anyway, match after match, year after year. Now put those two pieces together. The fear that has never fully left her, even now, and the ice-cold calm she showed, picking up a novel in the middle of the single highest-pressure moment of her career. Those are not contradictions sitting side by side. They are the exact same thing, wearing two different masks. The fear built inside those years at that academy did not break her. It built the very composure that let her come back from a set down and completely bagel the world number 3 in the very next set. And that brings us to the only question left standing. If Rafael Nadal quietly built this, brick by brick, over 8 years, starting when she was just 13 years old, what does that actually mean for everything still ahead of her? Rafael Nadal has spent his entire time as an indirect mentor saying something like this publicly exactly twice. Once, when a wildcard nobody had heard of named Alex Eala beat Iga Swiatek in Miami. And once, right now, after she became the first player from the Philippines to ever win a WTA Tour title. That alone is the answer. He does not celebrate everyone this way. He celebrated her specifically, twice, more than a year apart, for the two biggest moments of her career so far. That is not just politeness. That is recognition of something he already knew was coming, long before the rest of us caught on. And now you understand exactly where that recognition comes from. Not from some coach cheering politely from a comfortable distance. From 8 years of a young girl learning to function inside a room where even the greatest player in the sport's history still made her tongue tied, and somehow that feeling never fully went away. That fear did not break her. It built a 21-year-old who can lose a set, sit calmly through a rain delay reading Wuthering Heights, and then bagel the world number 3 like it was absolutely nothing at all. So here is where this actually leaves us. Alex Eala is now a career-high world number 20. She is heading toward tournaments like the Canadian Open, and eventually the US Open, carrying a title on her resume, a target freshly painted on her back, and a legacy that now has her name permanently stitched into it. The Rafa Nadal Academy just produced its biggest female success story to date, and everyone in this sport is going to be watching closely to see if this was the beginning of something truly enormous, or simply the peak of one unforgettable week. Because winning one title is one thing, carrying the weight of being called the future by a man who almost never says that about anyone is something else entirely. Can she do it again on an even bigger stage? Against players who will now see her as the one to beat, instead of the underdog nobody worried about walking in? That question does not have an answer yet. Nobody has it, not even Nadal himself, which is exactly why this story is far from finished. If Alex Eala keeps climbing, if she shows up at the US Open carrying this same unshakable composure, you are going to want to already understand exactly how she got here, instead of scrambling to catch up after the fact. That is what this channel is for. If you want to actually see where this goes next, stay close, because we will be right here covering every single step of it before anyone else even notices.